the Honorable Claudette Joseph, Attorney General and Minister for Legal Affairs, Labor and Consumer Affairs, and Mrs. Roxy McLeish Hutchinson, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Export Development. Now, as is usual, we will allow our panel to provide us with some updates before we open for a question and answer segment. So without further ado, Honorable Joseph Andel, the floor is yours. Hand over to you.
Good morning, and thank you, Press Secretary, colleague Minister, Honorable Claudette Joseph, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Export Development, Mrs. Roxy McLeish Hutchinson, members of the media, viewers and listeners, good morning, and welcome to this post-cabinet press briefing. This morning, I have a very brief update for you regarding the recent engagement of the Grenada delegation to the 77th meeting general of the United Nations General Assembly, which was held in New York at UN headquarters. Our delegation comprised of Prime Minister, the Honorable Dickon Mitchell, for a brief period to attend the UN Summit on Transforming Education sponsored by the Ford Foundation. Honorable David Andrew, Minister for Education, Youth, Sports and Culture. We also had as part of our delegation, our first secretary at UN Mission, Ms. Narissa Williams, Foreign Service Officer, Mr. Che Philip, Press Secretary for the latter part of the engagement, Ms. Tahira Carter, and the Prime Minister's Executive Assistant, Ms. Kira Lessie. The theme for this year's summit was a watershed moment, transformative solutions to interlocking challenges. And one of the highlights of it for us was the address of our Prime Minister to the UN General Assembly last Saturday, September 24th. And among the issues highlighted by the Prime Minister was the need for international cooperation that COVID brought to the fore. He also spoke about the fact that information must not only be shared, but it must be timely. An overriding theme throughout nearly all of the discussions was climate change and the need for urgent action to be taken, and the Prime Minister joined his voice and that of Grenada to that call so that the matter can be treated with urgency. He also spoke about the imperative of getting young people involved in the 2030 agenda. He urged young people to not see themselves as victims of climate change, but instead as agents of change. The solutions cannot be found without the involvement of young people who have the most to lose based on the inaction of the world's current leaders. And therefore, he charged young people to become active and to take part in the search for solutions to these problems, especially those related to climate change. In addition to the General Assembly, there were also meetings on the sidelines involving different organizations as well as bilateral engagements between Grenada and other agencies and countries. And one of those meetings was the 16th special meeting of the CARICOM Council for Foreign and Community Relations, COFCOR. And one of the highlights of that meeting was the need for the international community to adopt what is called a multidimensional vulnerability index to replace what stands currently, which is the use of GDP per capita as the main measure for determining the country's eligibility for concessional financing and grant funding. The issue with the GDP per capita metric is that you find that figures can be extremely skewed. And when countries are judged on that basis, Grenada, for example, is categorized as an upper middle income country, which means that the type of soft loans or concessionary loans that we once were able to access is no longer readily available to us and to most other CARICOM countries. So we are severely disadvantaged. It is as if you're being punished for making progress. So there's a very strong call for that to be redressed and to be replaced by the Multidimensional Vulnerability Index, or MVI, as it's more commonly called these days. CARICOM also looked at the very grave security situation in Haiti, and that is compounded by food shortages, political instability, and there were several calls for the UN and other agencies not to intervene militarily, but to take measures to assist the Haitians in finding solutions to their own problems. So CARICOM is exploring the possibility, given the level of respect that CARICOM enjoys by most political actors in Haiti, of putting together a team to engage the Haitian authorities and the different political players in Haiti to come up with a framework for ending the violence and putting Haiti back on a path of peace, stability, and democracy. There was also a meeting of AOSIS, the Alliance of Small Island States, in which Grenada has traditionally played a very important role. And again, the dominant theme was MVI, climate change, funding for loss of damage as a result of catastrophic natural events such as earthquakes, hurricanes, flooding, and so on. And the CARICOM foreign ministers had a very fruitful engagement with the Indian Foreign Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, and the need for strengthening of the ties, the already close ties between India and the Caribbean, was stressed. It was pointed out that CARICOM is still not taking advantage of trade and investment opportunities presented to us by India. So a commitment was taken or was made to ensure that every opportunity is seized by the various CARICOM member states. We were urged that to take full advantage of the opportunities presented by India, that traveling delegations must include business people, because at the end of the day, that is the ultimate goal of diplomacy, promoting the economic and political interests of our countries. India restated its commitment to collaborate with CARICOM on the questions of pharmaceuticals, information and communication technology, sports, technical and vocational training. At the bilateral level, Prime Minister Mitchell and I met with the Foreign Minister of Algeria to address a long-standing debt issue going all the way back to the 1970s. And while the matter has not yet been resolved, initial steps were taken to put in place a mechanism for settling that outstanding debt. The implication for Grenada is that because that debt has not been serviced over the years for various reasons, Grenada is listed in the international financial system as being in selective default, which makes it difficult to access concessionary financing. So that was a very important first step by us to have that issue addressed. We met also, well, I should say it was a one-on-one between the Foreign Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Amory Brown, and myself, to address another outstanding debt issue. It's a debt totaling in the region of 80 million US dollars, sorry, EC dollars, contracted in 2005 following Ivan and in 2013. So we have already begun the process of addressing that issue. Now, because it may be a politically sensitive issue, I would prefer not to get into details at the moment. But things are looking encouraging on that particular front. We also had a fruitful meeting with Saudi representatives of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and we were able to secure assurances of grant funding for various projects going forward. The contacts will continue, and we feel very confident that we are going to be able to benefit from that arrangement. I also had a meeting with the Foreign Minister of the Maldives, which is a very small archipelago in the Indian Ocean. And what do they have in common with us? They're a heavily tourism dependent economy. They're also very exposed to the shocks of climate change and other natural climate phenomena. We have agreed to share experiences in the field of tourism and to explore the possibility of having exchanges so that we can learn from each other's experiences. There was also proposed an arrangement to waive to get in place a visa waiver agreement for visits not exceeding 90 days. So soon the work will begin to put that into practical action. Maldives and Grenada also agreed to give favorable consideration to supporting each other's candidates at international fora. We also were able to take initial steps towards the establishment of diplomatic relations with the East African country of Kenya. As we have said before, part of our diplomatic thrust would be not only to strengthen ties with existing partners, but also to reach out to our sisters and brothers in Africa and in other parts of the global south to seek areas of cooperation and mutual interest. On the political side of things, we were able to have a very fruitful engagement with the members of the Grenadian community in Brooklyn. In fact, 2 engagements. There was a very successful dinner and ball and a town hall meeting held at Brooklyn College, I believe. And something very important in its incipient stage is the establishment of what is for the time being called the Grenada Diaspora Advisory Council. This is a brainchild of 2 young Grenadian women who have already begun the process of reaching out to, identifying Grenadians with specific skills, talents, capital, who are interested in giving their services and their assets to Grenada on a pro bono basis. So in the coming weeks, we'll be able to fill you in with more details on that. Venezuela was another one of the countries that we had a fruitful bilateral discussion with, and they indicated that soon they will be resuming the Petro-Caribe agreement, and this could not come at a better time considering the generally high price of fuel on the international market these days. We are also indebted to Venezuela through the Petro-Caribe agreement, and initial discussions have taken place regarding a mechanism for amortizing that debt. Details will be forthcoming as the process goes along. I thank you for listening, and I now invite the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Export Development, Mrs. Roxy McLeish Hutchinson, to give an update on the status of our diplomatic missions abroad and moves to recall staff and so on, those missions.
Thank you very much, Minister Andel. Pleasant good morning to Attorney General and Minister for Legal Affairs, who I'm joining also this morning in this briefing, and to our viewers online, and to those who are here with us in-house. The issue of diplomatic recall has been a subject of a very interesting debate within the recent months. And as a ministry with responsibility for Grenada's diplomats, we're pleased to provide an update this morning on the status of our diplomatic service. Okay, so in July of this year, subsequent to the change in administration, the policy decision was announced to have a review and recall of Grenada's diplomatic officers abroad. The ministry has taken the necessary actions to inform through consultation the requisite ambassadors who will be affected by the recall. Subsequently, several ambassadors have submitted their resignation, which we have asked the Governor General to accept through the Public Service Commission. And the other officers who have not yet been recalled have been advised of the recall, and the necessary steps are being taken to ensure that the successful recall happens. Generally, recall is a process that takes within 3 to 6 months to complete. It involves the repatriation of the diplomats. It involves the informing of the receiving states where they are posted of government's intention to recall the ambassadors and the other diplomats who are affected. It also involves the informing of the head of state of the intention to recall. So in itself, recall is not a quick process, but it's something that takes a period of 3 to 6 months, as I previously stated. Bearing in mind that persons are now moving from diplomatic status, which involves privileges and immunities, and returning to regular citizens. And so time needs to be given to allow persons to make the necessary transition, getting the requisite identifications, submitting the diplomatic instruments to the receiving state, and ensuring that we can adequately repatriate the diplomats. As with any recall, also, the normal process of posting diplomats is a process that generally goes hand in hand. So at this time, government is discussing the posting of diplomats to the various missions that Grenada has abroad. Once cabinet makes the final decision and the countries to whom the diplomats will be posted have agreed, since the process of posting diplomats has to happen on mutual consent, the ministry would be in a position to inform the nation of the persons who have been appointed as Grenada's diplomats. Currently also, we have, even though the recall has been given, most of the ambassadors are still in place because the process to do the recall, it's one that takes a while, and so people are wrapping up. For example, you would notice that our High Commissioner in London was active in the ceremony for the funeral ceremony for the late Her Majesty and King Charles becoming the new king. And that is because the work of government has to continue. And so while the ambassadors are away and are wrapping up their tenure, they continue to provide the services so that we can ensure that Grenada's image abroad and the work of government continues. And so I just wanted to provide this update this morning because I know this is an area of concern and persons are of the belief that a recall is an immediate process. It is not an immediate process. It is a process that takes a while. The wheels are turning with regards to the recall. And when the process is nearing completion, we'll be able to inform most succinctly exactly who are the persons who are going to replace the ambassadors are currently sitting in those positions, so that there's full transparency. But it's useless to give the information ahead of time because unless the receiving state agrees to accept the diplomat, we cannot say with any certainty that that person will be a diplomatic staff representing Grenada abroad. So I thank you all for the opportunity to provide the update and to clear up some of the areas of concern that have been circulating with regards to how the process of diplomatic recall and diplomatic posting unfolds in the ministry.
Thank you so much, P.S. McLeish Hutchinson and Minister Joseph, for this update from Foreign Affairs. We now invite Minister Claudette Joseph to provide us with an update.
Thank you, Madam Press Secretary. Good morning to my colleague, my brother, Minister for Foreign Affairs, and his PS, Mrs. McLeish Hutchinson. Good morning to you, members of the media, wherever you are, and good morning to the viewers on all the various platforms. I guess I do not have to engage in any long introduction in terms of what has been happening recently and certainly in the last week since the ruling of the Court of Appeal in the Alexander Clark matter. We all know that certain events arose in the conduct of that case, which led to the Court of Appeal last Thursday granting a permanent stay of execution in the sentence of murder convict Alexander Clark, and also on making an order for his release. And that is his immediate release. So as it stands now, he is a free man. I make the point, but the conviction still remains on his record. So I will share with you this morning the state of things as we found them in the legal system that would have contributed to such an outcome, the steps taken since assuming office, and also since the ruling of the court. And these steps, of course, include steps to strengthen the system, remedy some of the deficiencies in the immediate, medium, and long term. But before I do that, let me express to the family of the victim, Dixie Ann Clark, that we, the government of Grenada, we empathize with you. We feel your hurt, we feel your frustration, and we expressed sorrow that the judicial system did not work sufficiently for you. And as government, what we do is that we pledge to work diligently to ensure that we do not have a repeat of what occurred last week, and that no other Grenadian family of the victims of crimes will have to experience what you are now experiencing. That said, I would make clear to the public that the conduct of criminal matters are exclusively under the Constitution within the remit of the DPP. So it is the DPP who has full control over how matters of a criminal nature are prosecuted in our system. And while there is a right of appeal, in this case, there will be a right of appeal to the Privy Council. It is for the DPP to determine in his own deliberate judgment whether there is sufficient grounds or there are sufficient grounds on which this matter may be appealed to the Privy Council. This is entirely up to the Director of Public Prosecutions. Now, on assuming office, we found a judicial system that is terribly broken and needing urgent and critical care. And even before the decision of the court, in fact, on assuming office, we realized that even before we embark on our transformation agenda in full as it relates to the judiciary, there were several matters that we needed to attend to urgently. And so, as early as 1 week after assuming office as the Attorney General of Grenada, I met with the various units, the various departments of the legal system, and also the Commissioner of Police and some members of his team. And coming out of those meetings, we've had so far a significant improvement in the security provided by the physical infrastructure to the physical infrastructure of the judicial system, the registry, the courts, and to some of the personnel, including the judges and so on. So we have beefed up security. We have also begun strengthening the human resource capacity of the system. We've hired some new staff and we are in the process of filling some vacancies that still exist in the judicial system. And as part of the broader government policy, we are putting systems in place to ensure that those unestablished, temporary, and long-standing contract workers in the legal system are regularized, because that situation is one of the sources of a lot of discontent and low morale among staff. So these human resource matters are given high priority. We have also taken steps to enhance the physical plant or the physical space in which the staff in the legal system are made to work. And in that regard, I'm happy to report to the public that we have taken steps to secure the very fragile information and documents housed at the vault of the Supreme Court Registry. Those are going to be relocated to a more suitable and conducive location. We are going to relocate and reopen the mediation center and the court reporting unit of the Supreme Court Registry. Those two offices will be located on the ground floor of the Clico building on Young Street. That building currently houses the high courts. So all of those functions will be in the same place. And I'm even happier to report that the mediation center will be now accessible to persons, easily accessible to persons who are differently abled, because the previous location did not allow for that at all. So now we have fixed that. One of the situations that caused the problem with the availability of the transcript in the Alexander Clark matter is the fact that the court reporting unit, that's the office in the registry that prepares transcripts when appeals are filed, both in the criminal and civil jurisdiction of the court, that unit was woefully, and still is, woefully understaffed. Woefully understaffed. And I am happy to report to the public that we have full support from our cabinet. Cabinet has given the full support to the registrar and me to work to properly staff that unit and to take care of the backlog that we now have in the preparation of transcripts. And we are going to be working feverishly at this so that when next the Court of Appeal sits in Grenada, all of the matters will have the transcripts prepared. So we are going to do that immediately, having received the blessing of the cabinet to do so. Um, we are also going to be reopening the law library to the public. As you know, the library has been closed since around 2016 and given no attention. We we are going to be restocking and reopening the library, and it will be located in the Millennium Building at the bottom of Gore Street by the cobblestones there, right in the heart of town. So I take this as good news for the law students and also those members of the legal profession who used the law library a lot. Um, so those are the offices that we will be reopening in different locations. So that would be court reporting unit, and we will be staffing the court reporting unit to take care of the backlog, the mediation center, the vault, and the Sir Archibald Ned Law Library. And in the long term, we are going to be working towards the construction of adequate facility for the judiciary. Because our system is one that is three pronged, we have the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature um, being co equal arms of government. And what we have had over the years is that the judiciary has been under resourced and, in some instances, starved out by the executive arm, which has the responsibility to fund all three arms through the Ministry of Finance. So, while the executive has a home in the ministerial complex where we are, um, and the legislature has a home in the Parliament building, the judiciary has no home, and the courts have been moving, especially since Hurricane Ivan, all over the place, relocating here, there, and everywhere. And as it stands now, even with the adjustments that we are making, even with the improvements, we will still have a situation where the courts are functioning at all different locations, including the magistrates' courts in the town and the DPP, everybody functioning all over the place. So we are going to work very hard. This is my commitment to you as Minister for Legal Affairs. We are going to work very hard to ensure that we deliver to the people of Grenada a seat of justice, a hall of justice, and proper facilities from where the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Ministry of Legal Affairs, and the Attorney General's chambers can function. We also have gotten the green light from the cabinet to enhance significantly the apparatus at the court to record court proceedings so that we will not have an issue going forward after we've cleared the backlog of the transcripts that we have in the system now. Going forward, we will not have a problem of backed up transcript. We have been mandated to secure better equipment, and we will be looking for the best available on the market, and also to train staff who can be equipped to certify, not just to produce, but to produce and certify the transcript in the shortest possible time. As it stands now, we only have one person on island certified to or qualified to certify transcripts. And we are going to fix this because it is a situation that is entirely untenable. So the people of Grenada can look forward to us taking real giant steps and diligent efforts to enhance the delivery of justice in this country. Thank you, and I invite your questions.
Thank you so much, Minister Joseph, and thank you to our panel for these timely updates. We will now open for the question and answer segment. To our media colleagues who are already on the Zoom call, kindly raise your hands so that I can see you and call on you for questions. As is usual in the first round, we will accept 2 questions each, and then if there is time, we will come back around for another round. So please go ahead and raise your hands, and we will begin. KGBN, the floor is yours. Please pose your first question to the panel.
Yes. Good morning, Rena Pierre Thomas, GBN. My question, in Beyond the Headlines last night, it was uttered that the Hall of Justice was supposed to be part of the House of Parliament, along with the first plan, but that was removed by the previous administration. Could you confirm if that is true? And also, I've noticed that there's a billboard somewhere in the front of Mount Weldon of a picture of a Hall of Justice. Is that indicating that we'll be seeing construction coming forward when it comes to a new Hall of Justice in that area soon?
Yes, thank you, Rena, and good morning to you. What was said last night, as far as I understand, is correct. In between 2010 and 2011, the then Tillman Thomas led government embarked on an effort to build what at the time they called a democracy complex, which included the Houses of Parliament, the Halls of Justice, and the residence of the Governor General. The plans, as I understand it, all of the plans and designs and so for the Hall of Justice was done at the same time as that for the Parliament building, and the site was picked, and that was the site where the Parliament building is now. And the Parliament building was constructed shortly after Mr. Thomas and his administration were voted out. And as I understand it, that is because funding and everything was done for that construction to move forward. All of the work was not complete for the Hall of Justice to move forward. Critically, the funding was not yet secured, and that project was not pursued by the incoming administration, so that the Hall of Justice was not constructed. Just before the recent elections, it appears that some attempts were made, but those did not get very far. So based on what I have seen so far as Minister for Legal Affairs, I am tending to believe that for the most part, the billboard that was erected near the Parliament building just days before the elections was more a gimmick than anything real. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Minister. Rena, do you have a second question for the panel?
Is there any other case that is affected as it relates to the transcript? And can you tell me if a computer was actually missing because of the transcript? Because the information we got was that the reason the transcript was not completed was because of a stolen computer. But last night we're hearing a different case. So can you tell us what is the truth?
Okay, I know the public well and truly appreciate that this is a problem that we have inherited and we are trying our best to rectify. Now, as I understand it, the case was heard during 2015. As a matter of fact, apparently it was the last case that was heard just before Christmas 2015. And the equipment used back then, though it was electronic, was faulty. So that at times during the proceedings, the equipment, the recording equipment will stop or will pause, and sometimes the court staff wouldn't realize until some of it, some of the proceedings would have been missed, and then they'd have to restart. Now, when that happens, what I understand happens is that the judges who normally take notes as well while the proceedings are going on, the gaps created would have been filled using the judge's notes. So in this case, about 95% of the proceedings was properly recorded and transcribed by the transcriptionist, but about 5%, but 5 critical percent, including the summing up, the directions that the judge gave to the jury, and what the judge considered when sentencing Mr. Clark. That was the portion that was not recorded. And from all indications, the computer on which the recording would have been typed also, that is what cannot be found at this time. So it seems as though there is a computer indeed that cannot be found. And that will contain the critical parts of the proceedings that could have been filled in, the gaps that could have been filled in. What was the latter part of your question again? You asked something else.
Rena?
Rena, was there another part of your question? Okay.
You can go ahead. It just slipped my mind.
Okay, yes. If I remember, I'll answer. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Minister. I'm not seeing anyone else's hand raised on the Zoom chat. Okay, Nisha, yes, the floor is yours.
Good morning to everyone. My first question is for the Honorable Minister, Minister Andal, as it relates to the outstanding debts. I know you spoke of the EC $80 million contracted in 2005 and 2013, and you said they are politically sensitive issues. But as it relates to the debts dating back to the 70s, the one you said were on a selected default, can you elaborate a bit on that debt, please? Thanks.
Okay, so maybe my information was not complete enough. Not only the Algeria debt, but also the debt to Trinidad and Tobago and another one to Libya have landed us in a category of selective default. I do not have the details as to the specifics of the Algeria debt, and it is my understanding that it is a relatively small sum. Of course, over the years, interests would have accumulated, making it bigger than it was originally. But we are confident that we are going to have that matter resolved in short order.
Thank you, Minister. Nisha, do you have a second question for the panel?
Yes, I do. My second question is for Minister Joseph. Can you provide an update as it relates to the investigation into the faith organization, as well as an update on the Imani program? Thank you.
Before you run off, what specific update do you want on the Imani program?
Okay, there was indications that program was going to be revamped. Can you provide any details as to the status of where are we with that reorganization? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I answer your questions, if you would indulge me, the latter part of the question that was asked by Rena, you asked whether there are other cases that might be affected by the unavailability of transcripts. And the answer to that is yes, there are some cases in the system in relation to which the transcripts have not been prepared, but you have our commitment that we will work to ensure that all transcripts are prepared and that the next time the Court of Appeal comes here and matters come up on its list, it can deal with those matters having the transcript in hand. There may be some that have gaps in them, as was the case with Mr. Clark's, but we will work to ensure that all gaps that exist are filled, and that even where gaps exist, it will not result in the case being treated with as this one was. I hope that answers your question. In relation to the ongoing review and investigation of the matters relating to faith development, we have recently communicated with the directors of that company, giving our initial position and formally ending any contractual arrangement that existed between Faith and the government of Grenada, because based on all that we've seen so far, we do not believe that government was getting value for money in relation to the alleged services provided by that company. The sum, an exorbitant sum, has been paid by the government so far to Faith, and we are not able as yet to determine the services that were provided to the people of Grenada for those sums of money. So the investigation is ongoing, and I guarantee you we will not leave any stones unturned, especially since it appears in this case there was some gross misallocation of the people's money. In terms of the Imani program, we are working to ensure that while we improve the program, provide better training and upliftment opportunities for the persons enlisted in the program, and incorporate as many of them as possible into our into the regularization of public workers that we are embarking on. We want to ensure while we enhance the program, we do not, as we promised, have people lose their little employment. So it is it's a bit more difficult doing it that way, maintaining the workers while improving the program, but that is what we are doing at the moment.
Thank you, Minister. We now call on Nancy McGuire. Nancy, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Good morning to everybody. I have questions coming out of a release that came from the Government Information Service about the appointment of a commission regarding cannabis. My first question there was the makeup of the commission only has a provision for one representative of the Rastafarian community, and I'm wondering if that is possibly changed to include more. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and I do not believe that the terms and conditions or the terms of references that they are cast in stone. We are a government that listens, and so I am confident that your question will be given due consideration. I cannot guarantee that it will be adopted, but it will be considered. I will take it to the attention of the line minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Andal. Nancy, do you have a second question for the panel?
Yes, and out of that same release, there was a committee announced to help with some of the limitations in the staffing in the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. And then the minister this morning noted there were going to be posts advertised in the legal affairs in various areas. So I'm wondering, where are these positions advertised? Are they widely advertised? Could you elaborate on those? Thank you.
Well, I can speak so far to the positions advertised by the Ministry of Legal Affairs, Labor and Consumer Affairs. Those were advertised on the Government of Grenada, on the GIS Facebook page. They were published in the Gazette, and to the best of my knowledge, also in the local newspapers. So that is what I know happened in relation to my ministry, and I assume will happen in relation to the other ministries, because the advertisement of the positions, they are done in conjunction with the Public Service Commission as well. At least in the case of the Commissioner for Labor, in fact, I believe it is a Public Service Commission on our request who advertised the position. I'm looking at PS for a nod. Yes.
Thank you, Minister. We now call on MTV. MTV, the floor is yours. You may pose your first question to the panel.
Good morning and pleasant morning to the head table, Minister Andel and Permanent Secretary Hutchinson. I do have a question. My first question is, what is the situation now as it relates to the Grenada-Russia bilateral relations since Ambassador Oleg was called? I'll ask my second question after this one is answered.
Thank you very much for the question. Bilateral relations is not necessarily hinged to diplomatic appointments. So even though Ambassador Oleg Fyra has been recalled, Grenada does still maintain an embassy in Moscow, and we still do have relations with Russia. As a matter of fact, Russia has an ambassador accredited to Grenada who is resident in Georgetown. So there has not been a change in terms of the relations that we have with Russia. What is happening is government has decided to reconsider the personnel engaged at the mission.
Thank you, P.S. Hutchinson. MTV, could you just state your name, please, so we know who's asking the questions?
Oh, sorry, Donald Houston.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Houston. You may pose your second question to the panel.
Okay, my second question is to Minister Andel. Can we get an update on the Spanish training courses, the student exchange program, and whether or not the Chilean ambassador who was supposed to come to Grenada did actually come? I know you said it was something that was in the pipeline when you had your first post-cabinet briefing.
Yes. So subsequent to that initial contact, we have been in communication with the Chilean embassy, which is based in Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago. And as we go forward, we are going to have more substantive discussions as to when, how much, and so on, we proceed with that arrangement. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Andel. Now we call on Linda Straker. Linda, the floor is yours. You can pose your first question.
Good morning. I have a question for each minister. My first question to Minister Andel is, Mrs. Hutchinson did explain that there is a 3 to 6 months period where for a new diplomat to be installed, if I should use such a word. But can he tell us whether or not the Tremonto government has already identified and submitted credentials to the various agency or heads of state for our new ambassadors or honorary consul? And the debt he referred to with Algeria and Libya, are these the debt for the international airport?
Okay, second question first. The Libyan debt, I believe, was linked to the construction of the international airport from the era of the PRG. The Algerian debt, I do not have the particulars of it at the moment, but it dates back to the 1970s during the tenure of Sir Eric Gary's government. So it's a pretty long one. Regarding the presentation of credentials and the identification of potential people to fill different diplomatic roles, we are in the process of considering different people for the different positions. We are not in a position yet to call names. In fact, it is not wise to call names before you have the process get to a certain stage where the receiving country finally accepts or decides to accept the person that you're planning to post. So it is not wise to do that prematurely. But we are in the process of considering different people for the different positions. We have received quite a number of expressions of interest from Grenadians, in some cases even from non-Grenadians. We are going to assess each one on its particular merit and make a decision on the different positions as we go forward. Thank you.
My question for the Minister for Legal Affairs. Sometime we would have had the Hall of Justice, I believe was the name, on the coronage. And then for one reason or the other, that building had to become unusable or shut down. Can she tell us whether or not her administration has determined why was that coronage building stopped use? Because to the best of my knowledge, I think there were 5 court or so in it. What was responsible for the shutting down of the coronage building that was called a Hall of Justice?
Thank you, Linda. I have seen nothing that explains why that building was abandoned in terms of use by the courts. I don't know what caused the discontinuance of the use. I mean,
will government give some consideration to reusing it again?
If we have good reason, I can tell you when it was discontinued, I was active member of the bar, and at the time there were a lot of complaints by the staff in particular of having certain health issues which they somehow connected to the building. But in terms of anything formal or anything that will support or concretize those claims, I have not seen those. So until we've seen otherwise, we would err on the side of caution and not consider the use of that building.
Thank you, Minister Joseph. GBN, I noticed that your hand is raised again, so we will allow the final question from you before we move to closing comments for this morning.
Okay. Can you tell me the status of questionable projects such as the shrimp farm program that was under the previous administration? And also, can you tell me who exactly have to pay the workers of faith? Because they've been complaining they've been owed for 2 months, and the directors are telling them that government promised to pay them. So they're waiting. So we'd like to know who is supposed to pay the workers at faith for the 2 months salary that is owed to them.
As a new government coming in, we first have to settle in our different portfolios, and we also must remain focused on delivering on the promises that we made to the people of Grenada. And in this early stage, those are the primary considerations for us. The matters that confront us now that require investigation, those are current and live issues. And of course, Of course, faith is one of them. So we are dealing with that. Other older matters we will address, but I will be frank with you. We have not in great detail started to investigate those as yet. But we will be doing so because we take seriously the reputation of our country, preserving the reputation of Grenada, and also we take equally seriously how the people's money are disbursed. In relation to who pays the workers of faith, faith is responsible for paying their staff. None of the persons engaged by faith were engaged by the government of Grenada, nor did the government of Grenada commit in any form to paying staff of faith. So they are fully responsible for paying their staff, and they know that. And from what we've seen so far, they are more than able to do so, considering the millions they got from our treasury in a very short space of time. So if faith is not paying its staff, it is because it is choosing not to do so. And I can't advise the staff as to what to do, but they must know that the government of Grenada did not hire them, and therefore the government of Grenada does not owe them. And that applies to the other entities as well that that were part of the apparatus set up by the previous administration to use government funds, to use the people's money for other purposes, including basically helping to run a campaign. So those of you who are owed by these other entities, please know that they are the ones to pay you, not the government of Grenada. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Joseph, and thank you to our panel and to our media colleagues for the engagement this morning. We must wrap up now, so I'm going to invite P.S. McLeish Hutchinson for any closing comments that you would like to make.
Thank you, Press Sec. In closing, I would just like to say that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Export Development, as the lead agency responsible for government's diplomatic engagements overseas, stands ready, willing, and able to execute government's mandate with regards to the posting and recall of diplomats in our overseas mission. We also commit to ensuring that the discourse is made available to the public at the appropriate time. And so we commit to also providing the information when complete on who our diplomatic personnel overseas are and those who have returned to capital. Thank you.
Thank you, P.S. We now invite Honorable Joseph Andel to provide us with closing remarks.
Thank you, Madam Press Secretary, and thank you to members of the media for your participation in today's press briefing. From the point of view of our participation at the UN General Assembly, I think it was a very good engagement for us in terms of the level of engagements that we were able to have with the different multinational and multilateral institutions and the bilateral meetings that we were able to conduct with some of our partners. We were able to make some new friends, and I think very crucially, we were able to make some significant strides towards addressing the question of the debts that have landed us into the category of selective default. Once we follow up on them, Grenada can only benefit from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Andel. We now invite Senator the Honorable Claudette Joseph to provide us with closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam Press-Sec. Thanks to the members of the media for the interaction this morning and to the public for listening. I assure you that this government has utmost respect and regard for our Constitution, the rule of law, and we aim to preside over a thriving and buoyant democracy. In that regard, we will endeavor to give due consideration and prominence to the third and co-equal arm of government, that is the judiciary, so that the policy by which it appears that the judiciary was basically starved out into that and ensure that the judiciary is properly financed, properly equipped, properly staffed, and properly housed. And finally, on the matter at hand, I assure the public that under our watch, we will do all in our power to avoid a recurrence of the situation that happened last week, where someone who was tried and convicted by a jury of his peers walked away without serving as much of a quarter of the sentence imposed. So we will work really hard to ensure that this is not repeated and that all of the officers in the legal complex are contented, enjoy their work, and feel secure in discharging their responsibilities to the public. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our esteemed panel and to you, our viewers, for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at the next post-cabinet press briefing.